National Catholic Register. This is Register Radio, bringing light and clarity to the news and topics that affect your life.
May 15th marked the 135th anniversary of the promulgation of the groundbreaking encyclical Rerum Novarum by Pope Leo XIII. This week on Register Radio, we talk to Register contributor and theologian Larry Chapp. And Register contributor and photographer Jeff Bruno joins us to describe the launch of the 2026 Eucharistic Pilgrimage in honor of America's 250th anniversary. Hello, I'm Matthew Bunson, Vice President and Editorial Director of EWTN News and host of Register Radio. My co-host, Shannon Mullen, Editor-in-Chief of the National Catholic Register, is with me in studio here in Washington. How are you?
Good. It's good to be back together again.
Yeah, we were both kind of away for a little bit, so happy to be reunited with you. Well, in 1891, Pope Leo XIII issued an encyclical that is widely regarded as the document that established the foundations for what we consider modern Catholic social teaching. Rerum Novarum is called, in fact, the Magna Carta of Catholic social teaching. It served as the inspiration for virtually every pope since to bring to bear the wisdom of the Church on the great social questions of the times. With the Register, we've been devoting quite a bit of attention to Rerum Novarum as we anticipate Pope Leo XIV's first encyclical, expected to also be a contribution to Catholic social teaching. Larry Chapp asks a couple of important questions. What do we mean by social teaching, and how does it differ from the Church's teachings on other moral matters, and in what way did Rerum Novarum actually mark a kind of beginning? He joins us now. Larry, welcome to Register Radio.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks. Sorry for the glitch with regard to signing in here.
No problem at all. We're just happy to have you.
That's
well,
great.
so obviously great importance has been attached to Pope Leo XIII's encyclical, Rerum Novarum. Pope Leo XIV seems to consider Leo XIII to be so important that he partly took the name Leo in his honor. So let's start with that. Leo XIII, how important is he in the history of the Church, especially in modern centuries?
I think he's enormously important for a lot of reasons, but two main ones was that he sort of kick-started the Neo-Thomistic revival, and which kind of ironically points to the fact that Thomas had sort of fallen into disregard by a lot of theologians who preferred the commentary. But anyway, then with Rerum Novarum, the advancing of the Catholic social doctrine, social teaching, was a seminal moment. I mean, it really, really changed things in how the Church approached things like labor unions, capitalism, church-state relations, and on and on and on. And it was really groundbreaking.
So as a theologian, I want to hear from you because there is sometimes a misconception that Catholic social teaching was some new invention on the part of Leo XIII, that somehow none of that teaching had ever existed. Can you clarify that?
Yeah, in some sense, there is an accurate perception that Leo had started something new, because never before really had the Church set aside a set of moral doctrines and sort of called them, these are going to be our social doctrines, our social teaching. Prior to that, as I point out in the article, the Church leaned heavily on natural law theory in its moral theology, and the Church's relationship with things like economics and politics, capital, those sorts of things were simply dealt with under the heading of various moral theological categories and in natural law understandings of things. But really, with the end of Christendom and with the rise of modern secularity, with the French Revolution, the Enlightenment, the scientific revolution, the industrial revolution, we begin to see the secularization of society. And those various social realities like labor and capital and economics and politics, those things begin to disengage themselves from the previous sort of Catholic culture and took on an independence all their own. So the Church began to realize that it had to develop a set of teaching, sort of all its own, still rooted in that old natural law tradition, but with a greater specificity, a greater focus on these elements within the broader social world that had sort of separated themselves from the Catholic Church. In ways, for example, in sexual morality, the Church is talking to essentially her own adherents, people who are Catholic in marriage and so forth. How do we live sexually and so forth in that regard? But here the church is sort of specifically adopting a set of doctrines to speak broadly to the world, even amongst non-believers, drawing from the wellspring of revelation, but nevertheless trying to articulate principles that would be the foundation for dialogue.
Larry, the principles that you mentioned, a lot of them rooted in the natural law. Can you explain that a bit for our listeners?
Well, natural law is very, very simply put, is our rational participation in the divine plan for creation. The idea being that we believe in a creator God who is, we can tell something about God from his effects in creation. God has implanted his reason, his goodness in the created order, and he has imbued us with the rational capacity to discern that order, to discern his goodness, to discern his rationality. And thus we participate in it. And so what we essentially do is using our reason, we sort of tease out of the natural order the natural ends of things, what we call in philosophy the teleology of things. What are things oriented towards? What are they for? What are their purposes? And to see within those purposes the divine mind. And therefore we ground our moral theory, our moral theology, in the idea that our actions, our morally willed actions, should conform themselves to this rational pattern that God has implanted in the created order, such as, with regard to marriage and family and sexuality and so on. We want to know what the ends of those things are. And out of those ends, we develop moral principles. That's natural law.
One of the more alarming aspects of contemporary culture for us is this increasingly dubious flirtation with socialism. And we have, obviously, in Rerum Novarum, Leo begins his encyclical, as you write, with a defense of private property against socialism, and underscores that socialism is grounded in secular and atheistic motivations. It was a dead end, as you put it. Can you talk to that?
Yes. Obviously, towards the end of the 19th century, we had already begun to see the rise of socialist movements inspired by the philosophy of Karl Marx, but also others. And to a great extent, they looked out into the industrial world, the capitalist world. We're living in the era of the capitalist robber barons. There were not yet labor unions. The guilds had died. The old medieval guilds had died and been replaced with nothing. And so the plight of the industrial worker was in bad shape. And so a lot of people looked out at that situation and said, what we need is a more equitable distribution of the world's goods. It's unfair for some people to be gazillionaires and other people to be living in tenements. All right, and so we need to spread that wealth around. So the motivation was kind of egalitarian and philanthropic, but in reality, it was grounded in a kind of class struggle mentality. We want to empower the lower classes, to tear down the upper classes, to kind of construct a classless proletarian society. And none of it was grounded in Christian principles or a Christian vision of the proper ends of human life. It was a very materialistic understanding of things. And Leo knew that, and he knew, therefore, that there was a spirit of revolution, in a bad sense, embedded in that kind of socialist. I mean, that's kind of what Rerum Novarum means. It doesn't just mean about new things. It kind of means about new revolutionary things.
Larry, your piece lays this out so clearly. I felt like it was in one of your classes. But something that wasn't in there that I was interested in, how did this particular document influence you personally in your choice of vocation or your personal life and academic career?
Well, it didn't really so much inspire me to become a theologian. When I became a theologian, I was actually more interested in broad metaphysical, speculative stuff, the dense kind of stuff that bores most people. But once I became a teacher, I started teaching about things like the Catholic worker movement and Dorothy Day, and I also started teaching about other other social encyclicals from like John Paul and so forth. I actually, at that point, had never read Rerum Novarum. I was reading more of the modern social encyclicals. And it was about 30 years ago that I finally went back and read Rerum Novarum, and I was really dumbstruck by it. It just floored me at how prescient Leo XIII was. And from that moment forward, I'm talking probably about 1994, 95, I really devoted a lot of my teaching energy to unpacking Rerum Novarum. And it was very influential in my teaching career.
Well, if it was influential on you, it was clearly also influential on a lot of popes. Can you talk about that and how his successors have built on what he established with Rerum Novarum?
Yes, it seems as if almost every pope has decided that it's part of their papal duty to, at some point on the anniversary of Rerum Novarum, issue another social encyclical. And this is actually, it's more than simply an encomium to the glories of Leo XIII, our glorious predecessor. It has to do with the fact that what Leo established was more than simply an address to the needs of his time. Rerum Novarum is pure genius because what it essentially says is there's no solution to the human condition that can't, in a sense, be addressed by revelation of God in Christ. Furthermore, no condition in the human family can be addressed without Christ. And thus you need the light of revelation and you need Christian virtue in order for any system to work properly. No system is going to work devoid of Christian values and a Christian insight. And therefore, each pope after Leo XIII took that basic insight that we need to bring the light of Christ and to shine it into the social conditions of our age. And thus they took those principles and applied them to each changing successive social era. And I mean, a lot has happened in the past 135 years that I'm sure Pope Leo would be amazed at. But, so each pope has had to, like John Paul II had to address, the Soviet communism and then the rise of modern secular capitalism and so on.
Yeah, but exactly in so many ways as Leo XIII had foreseen and given us such direction in terms of how to approach it and to interpret what's happening.
Yes, he did. I think that being a man of deep and profound faith, the thing that Leo XIII does not get enough credit for was that he was a man of deep and profound intellectual instincts. I doubt Leo XIII actually wrote the encyclical, although I'm sure he had his input into it, and of course he signed it. Most popes have, theologians who help them write their encyclicals. Nevertheless, Leo, I think, understood deeply and profoundly where the trajectory of the ideology of his time was going to end. Now, he couldn't have predicted great technological breakthroughs like, the splitting of the atom and nuclear bombs and artificial intelligence and modern computers, but he certainly had an insight into the fact that the metaphysical and theological logic embedded in the modern world and in its secularism was going to end in tragedy and great misery for the human family. And so, yes, he was a very, very prophetic man.
As we can say about that and a lot of other things, if only the world had listened to the popes, we would be in a much happier spot. Well, Larry, thank you so much for your piece. The title of it is What Rerum Novarum Said to Modern Society, and you can find it at ncregister.com. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you, Matthew. Great to be on.
Well, you're listening to Register Radio here on EWTN Radio. Next up, we talk with Register contributor Jeff Bruno to tell us about the National Eucharistic Pilgrimage launching this weekend. Stay tuned.
Let's return to Register Radio on EWTN.
And welcome back. I'm Matthew Bunson, here with Shannon Mullen, Editor-in-Chief of the National Catholic Register. Well, in celebration of the United States of America's 250th anniversary, Catholics are invited to take part in the 2026 National Eucharistic Pilgrimage under the theme, One Nation Under God. Pilgrims will journey on the St. Francis Xavier Cabrini route to honor the first American citizen to be canonized. And the pilgrimage is set to kick off this weekend in St. Augustine, Florida, and conclude on July 5th in Philadelphia. Pilgrims will pass through most of the original 13 colonies and 18 dioceses, which will also host a number of events also open to the public. Jeff Bruno, a Register contributor and renowned photographer, joins us now. And it's especially delightful to have Jeff with us because, Jeff, you were so prominent and your photography was so extraordinary in the Eucharistic pilgrimages that took place and the Eucharistic Congress that took place, what seems now a very long time ago, but a very influential long time ago. So welcome back to Register Radio.
Well, thank you, Dr. Bunson, and great to hear from you and Shannon again. And the privilege of being able to cover it from the beginning, from that first sprint across the Golden Gate Bridge with the kickoff for the 2024 one, and then seeing so much of the country, and seeing the impact of the Blessed Sacrament passing through the highways and the byways, it has been the privilege of a lifetime. And to be able to be up close and personal, and with the book that we did, and being able to photograph, to be able to speak with, be able to be amongst the people in all these different communities and all the different cultures that really define what America is, has been incredible. And I'm really looking forward to going to St. Augustine this weekend to be able to be present for that launch. It's the grace that comes from these pilgrimages, from these processions, from the processions is with the Blessed Sacrament, the witness of the pilgrims, and the people that turn out to join in the local parishes and whatnot. It's breathtaking. It's incredible, and to be a part of it again is just pinch me. I can't believe it.
Jeff, pack your sunscreen. You'll need it
Yes.
In these next few months. Speaking of that grace, I know that you feel convicted that there's a connection between these two prior Eucharistic pilgrimages and the otherwise inexplicable surge in people entering the Catholic Church in so many dioceses across the country, that really was an outpouring of grace. Other people might have other theories, but that's how you feel, right, Jeff?
Oh, 100%. Other people might have theories, but I'm not going to say it. But anyway, they the effects of the efficacy of grace. It's one of those things where with Carlo Acutis, with if you sit in the sun, you get a suntan. You sit in the presence of the Lord, you become a saint, or however that quote goes. It's the same thing. It's like when Jesus walked the streets of Galilee and Jerusalem, and his sheer presence was the thing. It's like that grace is. And I think that, bringing the Blessed Sacrament, going, crossing all these different towns and places and exposing people, believers, non-believers, people that are hurt, people that are broken, to his grace. It's like there's an efficacy to it that can't be understated. And I really do firmly believe. And to that point, the year previous or prior, I think it was 2023, this is when I think that I saw like this something starting to really, really change, was in Times Square. They had a Pentecost Vigil procession in Times Square. Bishop Esbiat, one of the auxiliary bishops of New York, was kind of the sponsor of it. And it was 5,000 people. It was the largest Eucharistic procession in New York's history. And it began there. And that, I will never forget standing there, being there, as that mass of people in the Blessed Sacrament passed through New York City from Times Square to St. Patrick's Cathedral. And again, it's like you can just see it in the people that are around it, how it affects the people who are followers. Just, again, being in his presence. It's just, anybody who's a perpetual or does adoration, anybody who adores, understands this. And I think that, this is, it's something that I think the country has missed, for a long period of time. And super glad that this is happening now. Yeah.
Yeah, about that happening now. Here we are celebrating the 250th, or my favorite word of the year, semi-quincentennial for the United States. Talk about the logic, then, of celebrating this 250th under the theme of One Nation Under God, but targeting specifically for our 250th. What's the message that's being sent?
Well, I think it's so interesting because actually it's starting in St. Augustine, right? And it's like one of the earliest sites, where the Blessed Sacrament, where there was Mass, in the continent. And, to that point, it's almost like, 250 years later, we're 250 years in since, of course, that was much longer, prior to that, 1500s. But I think what's happening, or what it signals is that we have to return to one nation under God. And I think that by beginning this pilgrimage at St. Augustine, we're returning to one of the major start points for Catholicism to Christianity in this area, or in this hemisphere, on this continent. And by returning to that, if we do return to that as a nation, we really will be a nation filled with hope and with promise. It's like, and especially in this generation now, where we have all these new things, AI and all this other stuff that raises all these existential questions. I think that this, again, a return to Christ, and you see the hunger is out there. Everybody needs him. We all know that. It's just, he's present, he's available, the grace is there. It's amazing that, again, 250, it's perfect. It's like we're returning to that, and hopefully it's going to be a new start, a fresh start. The next 250 will be really happy and holy. I pray.
Jeff, I know in your own journalism and photojournalism, work in the past year, you've spent a lot of time studying some of the founders, some of the key moments in Catholic history in the United States, which is something that a lot of us didn't learn in our textbooks, even in Catholic school when we grew up. So this route is going to go through most of the original 13 colonies, and it's an opportunity to share some of that history. This is our history as Catholics, as American Catholics. Yes. What are some of the highlights that you're really especially looking forward to? Well,
okay. I mean, so I guess, I have my ideas, but I always have my ideas going into, something like this is like, this should be interesting and this should be interesting. But so often I am proven wrong, almost 100% track record on that. And it's the little things that, I'll answer your question, but I just want to say that, like, for example, in the first Eucharistic pilgrimage, the biggest thing that shocked me was North Platte, Nebraska. I didn't even know. I couldn't have picked it on a map. I didn't know anything about. But the earthiness of it, the simplicity of the people. I don't want to say it like that, but the thing is, they're grounded. They're grounded in faith and grounded in nature and grounded in farmland and all these other things. It was something that I'll never forget. And I will forget going through a lot of these big major shrines, unfortunately. It's just that it was so profound, to be able to really experience that type of thing. Along the way, though, on this coast, I think that, Baltimore in particular is for what it's worth, its significance, in the life of the American Catholic Church, can't be understated either. It's basically it's the foundation. It was the first cathedral and I think it was the first diocese. And, that's a big thing, of course. Coming up through Georgia will be interesting. I think that the Colonial Williamsburg will be very interesting. Again, it's where basically American, quote unquote, American culture kind of meets, Catholic culture. And, it's always so interesting to see that American Catholic, or I should say Catholic culture, American Catholic culture has had such an incredible impact on this country. It's like it is so, the Catholicism is so interwoven into the fabric of the United States. Mother Cabrini is the perfect example of that too, with all the accomplishments and all the hospitals and institutions that she founded over all the years. It's like healthcare, education, all these different things. It's like they can all find their roots back in, Catholicism. So it's the contributions to this country. It's like, and I pray that the contributions moving forward will be even more intense. And hopefully we are at the, 250, one nation under God. Maybe this is a reboot. Maybe we get to start again and, have that kind of real, Catholic Renaissance / revival in the country.
Yeah, well, we are a nation built on the legacy of Catholic giants, and I look forward to encountering new ones in the years to come. Jeff, thank you for this, and we really look forward to your thoughts and your photography.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to get there, and I'll be sharing a lot along the road. So thank you. God bless.
Take care. So, Shannon, very briefly, in this upcoming issue, I know we're focusing very heavily on pilgrimages.
Yes, we have a really interesting package of stories on pilgrimages as far away as the Camino in Spain, but also here, just doing local pilgrimages to your diocesan cathedrals and ways to kind of experience the pilgrim way.
Yeah, and we certainly want to encourage everyone to avail themselves of what is going to be, I think, a pretty remarkable journey for all of us in this new National Eucharistic Pilgrimage, again, under the theme of One Nation Under God. As we just heard from Jeff Bruno, that it's starting in St. Augustine, and there's a lot to watch, a lot to follow. Well, that's it for Register Radio for this week. Remember, for more news, analysis, and commentary, check out the National Catholic Register online at ncregister.com. Thanks so much for joining us here on Register Radio, here on EWTN. Until next week, on behalf of our producer, Michael McCall, and Shannon Mullen, I'm Matthew Bunson. Please take care, and God bless.